They were walled up in a cell for a year for science. This is how the experiment ended. As we all know, the idea of space exploration has been on the to-do list of several powerful countries for more than a century now. Considering how fast technology is evolving, the once quote-unquote paper-perfect theory is, in all likelihood, about to become a reality. As far as you and I are concerned, primary goal of space explorers is to send a human to Mars, or probably start a new civilization there. As much as it sounds like a fairy tale, this goal is likely to be achieved in a much sooner time than anticipated, as technology continues to advance at an astronomical rate. There's no doubt that knowledge and scientific exploration have been gained not only through massive financial investments, but also by the work of frontliners, particularly those who are willing to risk their lives in the name of science. As we celebrate the milestones we have accomplished or reached, it is extremely important to pay homage to the pioneers who set the course of space exploration in motion over a century ago. As we travel through time, we are making our stop in about 50 years ago to learn a few things more about the people who attempted to lay the first brick in the road to exploring Mars thanks to their grit and determination. Also, if you've not done so already, please subscribe to our channel and click that notification bell to get inspired by these real-life stories every day. Now back to the story. At the dawn of the space age, Soviet scientists were confident that intergalactic expeditions were the next milestone in space exploration. Having successfully launched the first artificial satellite and the subsequent flight of a human into space, it was time to dream big. Before the euphoria from Yuri Gagarin's achievement in 1962 could die off, they designed a new and elaborate project to explore Mars, which was broken down 4 phases. The space journey was scheduled to last approximately a year. However, deciding on how to provide long-term life support for astronauts loomed largely. A crew of 3 people would have to bring with them 11 tons of provisions, which would only be limited to food, water, and air. How to ensure the continued survival of astronauts for a year-long period proved quite impossible initially. In a bid to overcome that obstacle and make space exploration possible, they came up with the idea of setting up their own personal ecosystem on board. This meant that food would be freeze-dried and water and air would be recovered from waste. Scientists began to build a pressurized chamber designed specifically for the purpose of simulating human space travel to another planet. The project was started in 1967. When it came to selecting astronauts, scientists had a good idea of what the participants were about to get themselves into, so the selection process, which lasted for half a year, was quite a rigorous one. 6 months later, and following an extensive selection process, they had assembled a team of 3 from hundreds of volunteers. Boris Ulybyshev, a 20-year-old mechanic, a 29-year-old biologist named Andrei Bosko, and a 31-year-old spaceship commander and a doctor named German Manovsev were deemed fit for the experiment. Participants were made to understand the confidentiality attached to the project. They were not allowed to share details of the experiment, not even with their families. 2 of the participants, Boris Ulybyshev and German Manovsev, were required to make their families believe they were on a government assignment to Siberia and that it would be impossible to get in touch while there. Up until the day the experiment was supposed to start, the participants had the option of withdrawing from the program. This was because the lead scientists understood how life-transforming the intended experiment was. Their living space measured 4 by 3 meters in size, with the cooker, fridge, exercise bike, and communications desk taking up half of the space. It is not hard to guess that the boys had no comfort to look forward to. The participants were encased in steel walls with a tiny bathroom, 3 shelves for sleeping, water from purified and condensed urine, a repetitive menu, and above all, there was a fan blowing air with the noise level comparable to that of an underground train. You had to live in such conditions for a whole year. The subjects literally found themselves in a survival show in inhuman conditions where they were filmed by pre-installed cameras. Doctors, engineers, and lab technicians kept an eye on them, constantly pushing them to do more. In the early stages of the experiment, everything seemed to be normal and fun. The participants had ample free time on their hands as part of their daily routines. The typical routines included exercising, bathing, eating, taking tests and medical examinations, self-massage, playing chess, or anything they felt like doing during their free time. Then, their free time was limited to only 2 hours. Only then could they listen to the radio and pick up a book. Initially, they would converse with one another a lot about random stuff like the things they missed doing. They pretty much lived the normal life they were used to. After a while, a miniature greenhouse was introduced to their living space. They could grow common vegetables as well as edible grasses like barley, etc., which were rich in vitamin. Aside from the increased variety in the diet, the extra 5 paces of space were considered a luxury, and the idea of growing something in the cell enthralled everyone involved. Gradually, things began to take a turn for the worse. Disagreements became inevitable, and to make things worse, the observers of the experiment orchestrated a tense relationship between Commander Manovsev and the other 2 participants. The former being a doctor, he was to conduct medical examinations on himself and his fellow participants. However, their uneasy relationship meddled with that responsibility, which almost resulted in a conflict. Aside from the stress that came with his conditional living, he had the unsupportive nature of his colleagues, which made life and his responsibilities much harder. When news about the birth of his daughter reached him, Commander Manovsev wanted to abandon the experiment. Having gone through everything up to that point, he knew going back wouldn't be a wise decision to make. So he stayed. Not long after, Boris Ulybyshev, the mechanic, soon became the object of a spat. He began to lose weight rapidly. This caused panic, and the other participants were advised to give him a third of their drug supplements to help him recover quickly. They were reluctant at first, but later yielded. As if that was all, they were made to endure a 10-day emergency situation in the 3rd stage of the experiment. During that period, the temperature was increased to 30 degrees, the humidity level was increased to 90%, the oxygen level was drastically reduced, and hot food was excluded from their feeding. Apathy, constant thirst, and nightmares awaited the team. The tough guys who had arrived at the beginning were hard to spot by the time they were through with the 10-day emergency drill. However, with their understanding of the importance of the experiment, none of them even bothered to request better conditions in their environment, much less an escape from this terrifying circumstance. Then, things started to get interesting. The 3 depleted and near-death men teamed up together rather well and decided not to criticize each other, constantly argue, or fight over food with one another. Mysteriously, Andrei Bosco heard an unfamiliar female voice, and from her flirtatious mannerisms, he anticipated she would be very pretty. After a while, he inadvertently discovered a minor slit near the greenhouse porthole through which he saw the figure he had dreamt up fantasies about, and even handed her a letter, the content of which was something like this: "I'm not writing to you out of boredom, but out of a desire to meet you soon. I'll be out of the cell and we'll have more time to get to know each other." A few days later, Andre received a reply from Violetta. Despite the fact that the authorities were aware of it, they chose not to interfere with their love story. In order to make it appear as if the girl is waiting for a man from another planet, they inflate the situation. In reality, the couple was separated by only one wall. As the arduous 365-day experiment drew to a close, the participants had shown grit and determination and managed to adapt to the extreme living conditions of the project. Commander Manovsev was successful in removing a cyst behind his own ear right in the hermetic chamber. Sadly enough, getting confined in weird conditions definitely has its toll. Although the participants engaged in their intellect and exercised their body, their overall intellectual capabilities plummeted to a drastic level. Upon completion of the experiment, one could clearly see the toll the project took on them. They emerged from their chamber with the novelty of the environment they left behind only a few years ago. In other words, they acted like infants who were being exposed to a new environment. The participants went to work in the same institution that organized the experiment. It was clearly evident that they suffered psychological impairment from the experiment. Despite that misfortune, their participation in the project had numerous benefits for the field of science, like the discovery of a new field of science called cosmic psychology. Since then, a lot more attention has been paid to how well the participants are able to work together during the selection of a crew. In spite of this, Andrei Bosco can be regarded as the most successful participant. Though he also suffered psychologically after getting out of his chamber, he finally met Violetta, the woman he'd be living with for the rest of his life. The couple went on to publish a book together called, quote, A Year in Stargazer, unquote, detailing the unfolding of events that are hard to come by under the sun. At the end of the research, the participants were deemed to have been awarded the titles of heroes in the USSR. But for some unknown reason, that moment never arrived. When they found out they were not going to be publicly honored for their part in the experiment, the heroes didn't get angry. They admitted they did it not because they wanted to be famous, but rather they wanted to contribute in any way possible toward the realization of space exploration. In the end, the experiment set the stage for a whole new field of study in space science. Today, research all over the world is based on what those courageous and selfless men did. Even though so many years have passed and no one has walked on Mars, this experiment gives us hope that it will happen soon. All of this is a good thing for 3 ordinary people who have agreed to do anything to help their country get closer to a historic milestone, a country that has ceased to exist. If you enjoyed the video, kindly give it a thumbs up, leave a comment in the comment section, and share with others. Thanks for watching, and catch you in the next one.